All right, welcome back to the Nexus podcast. Ellen Boehm, the Senior VP of Strategy and AI Innovation at Keyfactor, is my guest. How are you?
Great. How
How's
are
Black
you?
Hat going for you?
It's hot.
It is hot.
But
That's the consensus here.
Yeah, but it's been great. It's having a lot of fun, had a lot of good conversations,
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to this one.
Tell me a little bit about your role in Keyfactor.
So I lead strategy and innovation, and what that means is taking a look a few years out about where the market's going in terms of tech, in terms of what our customers need to help be able to continue to have a strong digital infrastructure that is running their enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at new and emerging markets and technologies that we can kind of bring into our portfolio and add into our trust control plane to be able to help our customers manage and have that sort of zero trust mentality as things continue to evolve.
So we're going to talk a lot about post-quantum crypto. It seems like we've been hearing about this for a while.
Yeah.
Bring me up to speed, bring the listeners up to speed on where we are. I know there was an executive order recently from the White House that kind of quantified some stuff, but you're intimately involved with it.
So. Yes. Yeah. So we've been following this for a long time, and we have a lot of really smart people at the company that are cryptographers and that have been involved in the NIST standardization process from a testing perspective to take some of these candidate algorithms and put them into our products and be able to test the strength of them and just sort of advise along with the community. So we've been working for a long time in parallel to the development of this cryptographically relevant computer that is going to be able to crack the encryption that we know and use today with RSA and ECC. So you mentioned the executive order. I think that is, so there was an executive order, I think it was 14409 was the one basically saying we need, as federal agencies, to understand high value assets and critical applications that need to migrate to PQC. We're going to put some deadlines around that. And I think having executive orders that are putting some numbers and dates, and there was an OMB memorandum that gave a little bit more specifics about this is what you have to do, this is how you should become more crypto agile. When we see these written pieces of documentation with dates tied to them, I think it raises everybody's attention back to the subject of this is going to happen. This computer is going to be available to crack this code at some point in time, and we need to stop just talking about it and move to how do we actually be more post-quantum ready.
Mm-hmm. Do you imagine, let me back up. Where are we with, I know it's an impossible question to answer, but where are we with PQC in terms of just development, implementation, et cetera?
Yeah. So from the NIST algorithms that we've been testing, I do believe like MLDSA is one that seems to be pretty solid, and people are recommending use of it, testing of it, implementing it. So I feel like we do have a couple candidates that we can use, and I know that NIST is continually looking for additional digital signature algorithms and encryption key candidates. So it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not going to be like, let's pick one and it will be good forever.
Turn it on tomorrow.
And turn it on and nothing's going to break, right? So it's not just about picking the algorithm. It's about having a whole plan for how you migrate your enterprise, because there's so many digital connections that rely upon cryptography. We also need to know where that cryptography currently is today and what it is tied to, what business applications depend on it. And that is almost that's step 2 in the process is discovery. Step 1 is let's identify that this is a problem from a business level problem, because CISOs and CIOs and I think even CEOs need to understand that business applications could get interrupted if we don't think about a readiness plan to migrate at least the most critical ones now. So let's come up with a team, and then let's start to do some discovery about what we even have, and then we can get more into readiness conversations.
I mean, when the time comes, how expensive is this going to be? How big of an overhaul are enterprises looking at?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on how organized you are right now. Do you have governance around your cryptography, and do you have a tool or a set of tools or a system to manage and inventory what you currently have? Do you have an automation tool to be able to be crypto agile and actually go in and rotate out that cryptography and refresh it? And do you have a way to monitor that and show an alert when perhaps something is, here's a new key and it's out of date and it needs to be swapped? So it's more about that continuous platform management that we need to get into place.
And in terms of the threat landscape, how does this alter, if at all, what attackers can do? Or is this strictly a defensive measure?
That's a great question. So I feel like attackers are probably aware that this is also going to happen, and they are doing this sort of, you've probably heard harvest now, decrypt later, harvest now, forge later. The more capability that we have, or they have, to take information and store it and wait for the point at which later they can decrypt it and then do whatever they want with it. So that's probably already happening now. So that, I think, should also be a warning or a foreshadowing to, we should be able to update these systems as soon as we can, especially if it's a high value system or a critical application that's running your business, because that data maybe is already lost. So thinking about what you need to protect, especially if you're in a vertical where, like, confidentiality or patient information or things that you need to keep for a long time,
right?
There's some risk in that.
So I saw an article that you wrote where you talked about this being fundamentally a readiness problem versus a crypto problem. Explain what you meant by that.
Yes. So readiness to me is having a holistic program for figuring out what you need to update first. And that goes back to discovery. So step one is discover all of the assets that you have. And that's often a big problem. You could have millions, or maybe not millions, maybe let's say tens of thousands of identities between certificates, keys, tokens, and underlying crypto that has just built up over time, especially if you're a really large company. We have many of our customers are Fortune 100s. They have done acquisitions. There have been different groups that have developed over time different policies. So part of it is just getting all of that under control, getting all of it under management. So that's the big discovery piece. That is one big part of readiness. And then the second is just understanding what is the order in which you're going to start remediation. And that prioritization should be based around business impact. So step one are, what are the systems that can't go down or would be most critical if they were hacked into, or your business relies on them. And that could be anything financial or customer, or how you're serving your end customers, or if in the product security case, it's the devices that you're selling that generate the revenue for your business. Sure. And so everyone has a different answer for that, but you have to be able to prioritize that and then come up with a migration plan that likely involves automated tools, probably some vendor tools. So ask your vendors questions around, how are you approaching post-quantum, and do you have PQC ready product that I can incorporate into, so it doesn't have to only be all on you. Like that's another part of readiness. And the last piece would just be having the right governance around it and the right automation around this, so that if you don't already have an automated way to be crypto agile and to update in the future, because yes, let's say you update to ML DSA or some other, pick your favorite algorithm for that use case you're looking at, there's going to be another one in the future that you're likely going to need to change to. So let's kind of get ahead of that. We know from past migrations like SHA-1 to SHA-2, it took decades to get all of that stuff updated. And so now we're trying to figure out, how can we be a little bit more structured, use tools that we have today to have automated discovery, continuous discovery, and not think of this as a single point in time. It's becoming much more operational because we have the tools to be automated.
What triggered all of this? I mean, was it just kind of these older algorithms being finally cracked after, like you said, decades of people trying? And I remember all these hacking contests here and at DEF CON.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So yes, I think it just over time, compute power is becoming, more readily available.
Sure.
Like just the way that tech evolves. The other piece that I think is new and happening all at the same time is the emergence of AI agents that are being used instead of people to try to find vulnerabilities, to try to find weaknesses, and I think AI agents they can do good, and they can also, so we should be trying to use them to be able to test against what has been developed and proposed as strong. So I think that whole emergence of that tech and AI agents ultimately being able to be autonomous, work together on their own with some initial instructions and guardrails around them.
Sure.
That is going to that's almost a risk that I think is accelerating the need for us to have this PQC readiness program and mindset in place, because that whole space is happening way faster than I think a lot of us think.
The last 6 months have just been
every
incredible.
single week. There's, okay, here, I made this agent and I told it to play in the sandbox nicely, and then it got out and it did this thing. But so we're going to hear lots of stories about.
But I mean, it seems like a useful application that it could help accelerate this. Yeah.
Totally. Yes. So I know this isn't an AI conversation.
No.
But I think it is also another, just the timing is probably good for us to help reiterate this conversation about PQC readiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just going to be traditional attackers or people or what, or even just software. It could be agentic actors that are starting to work together in a way that we, maybe can't even predict.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of my listeners are in critical infrastructure, dealing with cyber physical systems, OT, et cetera. Obviously very complex proprietary environments. If I'm a CISO in one of those critical industries, what should I be doing now? What kind of conversation should I be having? Because a lot of these systems and environments don't tolerate downtime. They're afraid of disruptions, and for good reason. So it's a very different dynamic. I'm just wondering what your experience is there.
Yes. So I totally get it. I appreciate that it's very complex. We have legacy hardware running very critical systems that power our society, whether that be water, oil and gas, electricity, it's just stuff that we rely on. I think about what if the power went out here in Vegas and then the air conditioning wouldn't work? We would all be really unhappy and very sweaty. And but just one little example of the impact that it would have on humans. So very important to think about how we take what we've done in the enterprise IT side of the house and move best practices over to OT, but also understanding there's completely different constraints, and we have these control systems that they run on different protocols. Those protocols might not be able to do modern cryptography to use some of the stuff we've been talking about, or there could be even the controllers could be more constrained and they can't handle a post-quantum certificate because it is bigger and has more processing, it takes more processing. And if we need like real time, we've got RTOS systems, it's got to be fast, it can't break, and it has to, so all of that to say architecture might need to be different. I think similar to what we're talking about, discovery of crypto assets within enterprise environments, the same sort of thing is important for operational technology. Is, well, firstly knowing what devices are on your network, which is having understanding the crypto assets that exist within those devices, and then how do you maybe segment off and upgrade certain systems at the SCADA level, or have some kind of gateway in the middle. So to me, it's about architecture. I think it all can be solved, even when we do have some legacy devices in there. But again, using similar best practices for authentication and encryption and connection. So even when someone does get inside of the operating environment, we have these controls in place to be able to revoke access or prevent access and
Right.
shut things down. And, we won't hear these stories about someone breaking into another water system, which seems to be pretty popular.
So you mentioned earlier, harvest now, decrypt later. It's kind of a meme out there
Yeah.
with relative to this. But any of this operational data particularly vulnerable to that scenario, or any more vulnerable than traditional IT data?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think about, sure, if somebody hacks into a corporation, because they really don't like, the president or the CEO of that company, okay, that makes the news. To me, it's when it impacts like my mom or, somebody's grandma that is just trying to get a glass of water. Like that is much more widespread in terms of impacting a society from like a scare tactic perspective to say, oh, look at what I can do.
Yeah.
That elevates and maybe feeds egos and things like that. I don't want to get too like political in terms of that, but you know what I'm saying? It's I think critical infrastructure, we call it critical because it is. That's why I was encouraged to see in the executive order on PQC reference to these critical industries or critical infrastructure verticals that can even include healthcare and hospitals. And you think about like back in COVID when there was challenges with being able to just get people seen, and another pandemic we've seen the impacts of that. So where am I going with this? Yes, I think those have broader impact just because of people and humans, and that's we talk a lot about AI and tech, but we're all here and we're living and we're on Earth, and we thrive off of sort of human connection. That's never going to go away, even depending on whatever technology we're using to get to the next level. Yeah. So whenever it impacts humans and how we live, I think that elevates up the need for us, especially like I live in the U.S. and I'm American, and we have certain things we rely on to be safe and to live our lives, and that's kind of what we count on our government and those entities to provide. So executive order, I think, is a good step to help us move in that right direction. And in critical infrastructure, companies should also be thinking about how they can follow along with that.
So related question, you mentioned visibility earlier. How tough is it to have a pretty accurate inventory of your crypto, of your certificates within these, again, operational environments?
I think it's challenging because I don't think people have had the tools to be able to do discovery. It's been something we've been talking about, and I'm seeing many more vendors offer solutions like that, like we do, because we are seeing a need to discover things that aren't there. And that's part of what our customers have been telling us when we've been talking about automation and readiness. They're like, okay, that's great, but I can't be ready when I don't know what I don't have. So we go back to the discovery step. So that's always step one. So I think there's other tools, and there's tools to do these types of things. So figure out what works for your business and just make sure that you're at least doing a scan, and then you're doing it continuously, and that you have sensors that you can connect to systems that you're using that can catch all of this stuff, whether it's certs or keys or tokens or API keys. You need to know what they are, where they are, and then get them into a system so that you can figure out what to do with it.
So once migration happens, is there an order to it? Is there a kind of start slow philosophy, or how do you imagine it playing out?
So I think it needs to start with what is the most critical piece. You also don't have to do everything all at once. And I would recommend starting with, if you upgrade one piece of your environment, understand what is talking to it, what are all of the endpoints that have had secure connections to it in the past, because you don't want to break any of those if all of a sudden they can't talk, because it's like, you were speaking one language and I'm speaking another language, and now we're just disconnected. So it's prioritizing based on business use case, impact to the business, and then to getting that to as secure as possible, and then figure out what it's connected to, and then that would be the next round of things, and doing it in a way that you don't break the business.
And so what does governance of all of this look like? Does it change radically once migrations start?
So I think governance is something that is is broader than just this team, the crypto team, and governance should involve others from, application development, security, probably even compliance, and coming up with if you don't already have a plan, a governance plan or a governance tool, this has to be part of it. So cryptography and digital trust infrastructure needs to be a part of the solution. So yes, I think it's broader than this, and it should encompass this as well.
And does it change who's involved, who's part of it?
I think cryptography has, because it's been this thing that underlies all of our digital infrastructure, and it's always just worked. A lot of people don't know that it could be a problem. And I think that's why elevating it up and having people across your PQC readiness team that are involved in different parts of the business to understand how important it is to migrate and be ready that's going to be what's different. Is before it was just, crypto is done by some really smart people that are kind of in the back office, but
Sure.
Now cryptography is becoming a business continuity problem. So that's why I think it does have to involve other people. And then when we get to the cases where it could be something that could be like in the executive order case, not so much a regulation, but like a requirement, then much more people will get involved because it's just been elevated as a business priority.
And are you hearing any commonalities among challenges right now? I'm thinking, for example, a CISO asking for budget for this and getting some pushback from the C-suite because I can't think about 2030, 2035 right now, and AI changes everything every week.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we've been having conversations like this, is to give people a bit more of a sense of urgency that they can level up to the CISOs, because you're right. I think AI has been getting more attention because it's the buzzword these days. It's what everyone's talking about. It's more easily understood too if people have been using Copilot or ChatGPT and they're like, okay, I know
Sure.
I can understand a little bit about that because I do it at home to figure out, what's going on for the weekend, and I'm looking for some fun events and I want it to organize it for me, and people can get that. Whereas PQC, they're like, well, I don't know how to relate to PQC at a C-level perspective. So that's why bringing it into saying this is encrypting our data, this is encrypting our systems, this is making sure that we're going to have this business continuity. So I think that's kind of the approach that we're going to have to take for it.
Yeah. And we probably should have talked about the supply chain too, and how this impacts relationships with partners, with vendors, contractors, et cetera. I mean, what is that going to look like? Mm-hmm. It has to be some compatibility, I imagine, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. So that's obviously in order to have, whether you're building products, whether you're running an operation, you have a variety of different vendors involved. When it comes to security and certificates specifically needing to work across different vendor products, that's something that you have to be able to manage, internally. So from a supply chain perspective, I think asking your vendors, will they have PQC ready product? How is that going to be compatible with your migration plan? That's also a really important conversation to have now, and just understand, is their timeline going to line up with your timeline? Because if you start migrating over your stuff, it needs to be compatible.
What's your sense for how often these conversations are happening, not just with suppliers, but I mean, everything we've talked about today?
I feel like it's starting to pick up again, because I think the executive order was good. Other countries have already been talking about this, like the UK and Australia, and so the US isn't the only one. It's just This was one of the recent ones that we talked about in the news. So I think that is elevating it up a bit. I think coming, and we talked about it at RSA, we talk about it here at Black Hat. I think it still though needs to be elevated more, and also if you haven't started your readiness plan right now, you probably are late. Don't panic, but 2029, if Google, says, okay, that's the day they want to be ready, the year they want to be ready, that's 3 years from now. And getting budgets, to your point, especially if it's a big company, like right now we're starting to plan for 2027. That means we're not going to do anything until next year, but at least you can start a team. You can start putting that into the budget for next year, because then you're really only going to have 2.5 years to work on it. So but I do feel encouraged that we're moving past we've acknowledged that it's coming. We have some candidates that NIST said are good. Let's come up with some actual plans and start working on it now or in 2027 as soon as we can.
Is that going to be kind of the final trigger, so to speak, when the Googles and AWS and Anthropics of the world say, okay, we're here?
I believe so. I mean, so that has definitely been helping us, is having some of these other companies, these big names. It's not just us saying it. It's not just the governments saying it. It's sort of a community coming together and being like, okay, we all believe that this is real.
Yeah.
And we're here to help.
This is a big deal.
Yes. Well, I appreciate the time to chat about it.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate it. I think I've certainly learned a lot. So.
All right.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.